Hello, I'm Annette Young, and in this special edition we're here in Scotland, whose haunting beauty often provides a backdrop to many TV series and films about witchcraft and sorcery, such as Harry Potter and Outlander. But back in the 16th century, here in this country, a true horror tale began when thousands of Scots, predominantly women, met their deaths after being accused of being witches. Now, 400 years later, the Scottish Parliament is being asked to clear their names.
Those who met this fate were not witches, they were people, and they were overwhelmingly women. At a time when women were not even allowed to speak as witnesses in a courtroom, they were accused and killed because they were poor, different, vulnerable, or in many cases, just because they were women.
Across parts of the US and Europe, the practice of witch hunts continued right up until the 18th century, including here at Torryburn in the east of Scotland, where women were tied to rocks at low tide after facing accusations of practicing witchcraft. We take a look back at those dark chapters of history.
Depictions of witches like these date back as far as the Antiquity era. During the Roman Empire, those suspected of sorcery were left alone if believed to be harmless. But the Old Testament condemned them as early as the 7th century BC.
It says, "Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live." In monotheism, supernatural power belongs to God alone and his priests. Witch and magicians cannot be allowed this kind of power.
Yet the Church tolerated those seen as witches throughout the Middle Ages. Then, amid religious unrest in the Renaissance period, the Pope cast witches as heretics. In 1486, 2 German clergymen wrote The Witch's Hammer, a witch-hunting manual.
The grounds for trial were often based on rumour. In a village, if a farmer lost all his livestock or children, he would accuse a neighbour, usually a poverty-stricken woman. He would accuse her of putting a curse on him. This woman would then be arrested, tortured, and would denounce other women.
For the next 3 centuries, some 200,000 witches were tortured and executed in Western Europe, the majority women.
This picture, Preparations for the Witches' Sabbath, is an engraving from 1612. The most serious accusation against the witches was not practicing magic, but worshipping the devil on the Sabbath.
As science and medicine advanced, witch trials began to decline. In France, Louis XIV declared sorcery to be an unfounded superstition. But the hunt continued in North America. In 1692, in the Puritan community of Salem, more than 140 people were accused of witchcraft and some 20 executed.
Here in Scotland, the execution rate was 5 times the European average. The massive witch hunt, beginning in earnest after King James VI attended the North Berwick witch trials in 1590. It was there accusations were made that witchcraft was used in seeking to sink the king's ship upon his return home from Denmark following his marriage. Fast forward to the 21st century and these two women, Claire Madison Mitchell and Zoe Vendatozzi, are determined to right history's wrongs and seek a pardon for close to 4,000 Scots who found themselves accused of witchcraft. I met them in Howe Cemetery in Dundee. Claire and Zoe, can you explain to me the importance of this stone?
Well, this stone has become a symbol in Dundee for a woman that was accused and then executed as a witch, who was called Grisel Jaffrey. And you can see that there's certain tokens and things on the top that people come and mark her and mark the witches generally. And I say witches, there weren't real witches, there were women and men that were accused and often executed as witches. So people come and leave things like money, coins, feathers, ribbons, stones to mark that she was here.
Claire, you're a lawyer, a QC in fact, and Zoe, you're a writer. What prompted the two of you to start this campaign for Witches of Scotland?
The first thing, I think, was that I was aware that there was such a poor visibility of women's history in public places. And after a while, we considered the issue of the women of Scotland, the history of the women of Scotland, and the terrible history of 2 centuries of women being accused as witches. Innocent women who were accused by the people in the country, they were prosecuted by the state, and they were convicted of being witches. And the numbers are astronomical compared to other countries. So it was at that point that we decided we wanted to do something about it, and we wanted to try and bring justice insofar as we can to those people that were convicted of witchcraft.
And 85% of those who were prosecuted were women. Why were women singled out?
There was a theory at the time that women were intellectually and morally inferior to men. So if the devil was coming into society and he was trying to do his evil work, who would be the easiest people to get to do his work? Would it be the fine, upstanding men of the country, or would it be the intellectually and morally inferior women? So women would get together, they would renounce their baptism, they would say that they would do the devil's work, they would be promised treasures, none of which anyone could ever show that they'd received, and they would do the devil's work. So that's why overwhelmingly the people that were accused of witchcraft were women.
So why is it important that the Scottish Parliament pardon these people?
What's really important, what we're asking for is the Scottish Parliament to pardon all those that were accused of witchcraft. That's the only legal way we can try and change their status. 4,000 people were accused of witchcraft. At least 2,500 of them died in a terrible, brutal miscarriage of justice. We owe it to those people to record that history got it wrong, that we got it wrong, and that in fact these people were not witches. We owe it to those people, and we owe it to ourselves, to recognise that bad things can happen if we don't carefully guard against them enough. And therefore I think it's important that in the 21st century we put down a marker to say these terrible things happened. It's also very important because women have not received the equality that we thought they would have. So it's important to reflect upon our history, to show what went wrong with our history, and to see where we are now and to see whether or not we can do better.
Now, even to this very day, the word witch can be used as an insult towards women. You only have to think of the US presidential elections in 2016 when Hillary Clinton was accused of being a witch. And French feminist and journalist Mona Chollet has written a book which has become very popular in defence of witches, in which she argues that the time has come to reclaim witches as a positive symbol. Do you think that's possible, Zoe?
While our campaign very much rests on the idea that the people that were accused in Scotland were not witches and that we don't believe in witches or women or men doing the work of the devil on earth, I think the idea of the witch and the symbol of the crone and the power that women have, I think it's really interesting to look at that and reclaim that word, you know, because it's a word witch that's used frequently to put women down. All through our campaign, I've intermittently Googled and searched through Twitter to see how the word witch is being used. And our First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, is called a witch all the time. And I think it's really easy because it's got strength there. People are frightened of it, but it's also comedic and it's belittling and it's very close to a swear word without actually being a swear word. So I think it's a polite way of saying, shut up, women. So I'm interested in it being reclaimed.
Claire?
You have lots of young women, particularly women, but some men too, on social media, who now say they are witches, who identify a witchcraft practice. And what they're doing is talking about communing with nature, they're talking about spirituality, and there's a huge movement. So I'm delighted if a word that can be used to belittle a woman can be made into a word of power for a woman.
Behind me is the Coolross townhouse on the east coast of Scotland, where those accused of sorcery were tried, tortured and executed. Even to this very day, those practices continue in parts of the world, especially in Africa. A Franster team headed to a village in Ghana where some men have accused their wives of being witches, a move that has destroyed their lives.
They're known as the witches, and there are 113 of them living in this camp in northern Ghana. These women, shunned by society and cut off by their families, were forced to live here with no financial resources after they were accused of witchcraft. Azia Fusheni's own personal hell began 6 months ago when men surrounded her house one morning. They accused her of killing a neighbor using witchcraft.
If not someone comes to my aid.
I heard a crowd gather in front of my house. A man started saying, "A woman died and it's your fault. You killed her. We're going to kill you." I said to him, "But how could I have done it? I don't even know her."
There are no trials. These women are often ordered by the village chief to live here in these small huts, sometimes with their children, and there are no laws to ban the practice. 2 NGOs were founded to help these pariahs. Mustafa Isa works for one of them, and it's personal for him. He spent his entire childhood in this camp.
My mother was accused of being a witch. So when I came here and grown up, I realized that my mother was innocent. So almost every woman who is brought here is equally in the same shoes with my mother. So my mother is even no more. But I feel it for women who are accused of witchcraft.
Today, he's visiting the camp's oldest resident. She's been waiting to regain her freedom for 33 years. Her nephew owed her money. To avoid paying her back, he accused her of witchcraft, and she's desperate to go back home.
There's just too much suffering here. We can't even find food. Look at this spoiled root vegetable. We're supposed to make it last until tomorrow.
Mustafa then asks the woman for some information so that he can later go to her former village and plead her cause. That's also a part of his job, to travel to villages to change people's minds. Accusations of witchcraft are almost always aimed at women. It's a way to remove them from society when they become unwanted, whatever the reason may be. Officially, Ghana is the last country in the world that still has camps like these. In 2014, a government commission was set up to close them, but met fierce opposition from locals. Today, there are still 5 of these camps nationwide, home to some 300 women.
And that's it for this special edition, coming to you from Scotland. So until our next show, bye for now.